Thank you. So I'm a bit stressed to be here today in front of you. So let's start. In this briefing, I would like to share my personal story of reversing this card, which is a Toshiba Flash Air card. That's a project I started in 2015. So it took me 3 years to get code execution. I have to say that I did most of this work during my spare time, so at night and during the weekend. So over the next minutes, I'm planning to explain how you can execute code on the cards and hopefully give you enough elements that will allow you to reproduce everything yourself. In this talk, I will only use open source tools such as Radar, and I will also present tools that I wrote. So everything is online, and at the end of the talk, you will be able to use these tools to execute a native code on the card. And there's a calc here, and why? That's because at the end, the payload will be a calc and will print a calc on the card. On the way to code execution, I will dig into the card details and reveal its CPU architecture and its operating system. And I will explain also what the Flash Air card, the Space Probe here, and the PS Vita have in common. And trust me, these answers are really surprising. These results are based on my own experiences, and it's possible that I made some mistakes, so if I made any, please let me know, I will correct them. If you need to, the slides are online, so you can take a picture of this code, or you can go to this website to get the slides. In between, I will drink some water. Okay, so first, I will briefly discuss the Toshiba Flash Air card. These cards are mainly used with a digital camera in order to access your file over Wi-Fi. The Flash Air card, by default, provide a wireless access point that you can access with your smartphone or laptop. And this card can be easily configured with a file named config on the file system. So for example, you can set the Wi-Fi password to something more robust than the default 12345678. Indeed, there is more than Wi-Fi with a Flash Air, and Toshiba was, here to go back. Yeah, sorry. And Toshiba was really smart and allows you to write Lua script to the file system, and then you can execute this script on boot or by connecting to the card over HTTP. On top of that, Toshiba designed a specific Lua API that you can use to interact with the external world. And today, a lot of people are using the Flash Air card for really cool projects. So here on the right, we have a Flash Air card that is accessing the Bitcoin rates over HTTP with Wi-Fi, and then it's talking with the LED screen over I2C in order to display the current rates. These Flash Air cards are indeed not new. I don't know if you know them. There are 4 generations of Flash Air, W1 to W04. Today, if you go online or in a shop, you will only be able to buy W03 and W04. This talk will only focus on W03. So why? Because it was the only one available when I started this project in 2015. The CPU, the operating system are the same on W02, W03, and W04. So that's it for the Flash Air presentation. And first, I will need to show you my checklist so that the game plan to go to get code execution. First, we need a way to get a memory dump out of the card. Then we need to discover the CPU architecture. So spoiler alert, it's not ARM. Then we need to discover the operating system. It's not Linux, something more fun than that. And then we need to find some kind of execution vector, so that could be an overflow or an undocumented command. And again, the payload here will be a calc. So let's try to investigate ourselves. And the first thing that we can do is try to download the updates and check what is inside. So today, there are 3 firmwares. Version .01 is currently installed on card that you can buy, and .02 that's the update that you can download from the Toshiba website. So back in 2015, it was a bit different. The version on the card was .00, and the only version that you could download online was .01. Today, the only way to retrieve .01 is to use the Wayback Machine from Internet Archive. So it's not easy to read on the slide, but if you download the slide, it will be okay. You have the link that you can use with the Wayback Machine in order to download the firmware version .01. So I said before, I started this project 3 years ago, and this talk will only focus on firmware .00. The addresses that I will show today are related to this version. However, the final demo will be based on .01 because my goal is to show that code execution works on cards that you can buy today. And I want you to reproduce everything. So let's have a look at these installers. You can find two online, one for Mac, one for Windows. And the best way to go is to go for the Mac installer. That's a zip file. So you can unzip it and navigate the directories. You will find two important things inside. Few config files, I think there are two, as well as a binary named fwupdate.fbn, which is 1 megabyte large. The config files are really interesting, and they contain a lot of useful details about the update function. And without reversing, we can learn that the software update tool will first copy the binary to the card, and then add the following line to config. That's a command equal update -f, the name of the update, the binary update, -rm like remove, -reboot. So what we can do next is open the binary and look at the xdump. So that's an output from Radar. So at first here we are likely looking at a plain text header starting with /r main2. Then in yellow, the big yellow block, we have a bunch of 0. And if you look further away in the binary, we have like likely binary data as well as strings. There is a small issue here because regular tools like Beanwork don't give any useful information besides finding some HTML and XML data. So what we can do, we can try to open this binary with Radar and try to look at strings contained in the binary. And I will do that with a demo, because demos are good. Okay. Oops. Nope. One more time. Shell. Okay. So I open the file in R2. Is that big enough? Okay. Then I will, so it was a yes? Big enough, okay. Then I will ask R2 to change the size of the block using its analysis, and then by using the p equals z command, I will ask Radar to display the number of strings per block. And for example, here we have a lot of strings. We can jump with S and type PSB, that's a print string in block. And then we'll have string in the binary. And that's really interesting here because we have, if we go up, we have a lot of information, like let's say here, we have errors format string, and that gives us a lot of information about the binary. I forgot to say that on the p equals z output, it's likely that at first we don't have much strings, so it means that the binary is likely not encrypted and not compressed. So let's go back to the slides. So in this binary there are 15,000 strings. That's a lot, and today I will only describe two. The first one is eva.cgi, and that's a script that you can access over HTTP after connecting the card Wi-Fi. And the content is here on the right. It's really interesting because it's likely that the flash share is scanning for other access point on boot, and also at some point it will say that the last blue block, that the DHCP server was started. This CGI script is really important because it's likely std out, the output buffer. The second string that I will discuss today is telnet, and in the binary it was really close, this string was really close to parameters names used in config. So if you add telnet equal 1 to config and reboot the cards, a new information will be printed on the eva.cgi, that's telnet start, and then a telnet daemon will be available on port 22. Connected to the card using telnet will not work by default, so let me show you what you can do. Sorry, I need to drink again. So the trick here is to send the commands character per character, and to do so you need to type the telnet command in the usual way, then type the escape character. Then you can type mode character like in yellow, and finally you can type any command you want. For example here, the command is version, and the firmware version is .01. So speaking of commands, we can try to list them all by asking for help. So you can do that with help in commands or help in telnet. And both ways will give the same results, that are 32 commands, and only the first one are displayed on the screen. So mod, and the help for mod is modify memory, is really interesting. And when I first saw it, I believed that it was the solution to execute code. So it's not. Indeed, mode can only change data and not code, so we need to find another way to get code execution. However, fdump and dump are really useful because they are used to dump memory on the cards, and we'll try to use them later to acquire a bigger dump. So we have a better understanding of the flash share, so we can connect to the cards, We can use telnets, we know some commands. It's likely that if we have a physical access to a card, we'll be able to build fake updates. Yet, it's not enough to execute anything. So it's time to have a look at the card internals. So to do so, of course, you can remove the plastic enclosure of the card with a sharp blade. Or because this card is using Wi-Fi, we can look for FCC ID. So the TCID for the W03, it's on the back of the card. It starts with ZVP42. That's a nice name, nice number. And the best solution here is to go to the FCC.ID, the FCC-ID.io website in order to retrieve FCC applications. Again, you have the link here on the right. So if you read these documents on the FCC website, you will discover some useful information. For example, here on the left, you have a PCB with a components number. And if you are lucky in this FCC application, you will also have access to nice information. For example, here on the right, we can see that the black line is the wireless antenna. So using these pictures, it's possible to discover most of these components. So let's have a look at the PCB. The blue components are related to the flash memory, and the big one, indeed, that's the component that is storing your data. In yellow here, we have a SPI chip. Yellow, sorry, which is 2 megabytes large. It's really small, it's 4 millimeter by 4 millimeter, so it's way smaller than my nail. And the bad news for us is that it's 2 megabytes, and the update is only 1, so it's likely that we are missing some really important information in the update. In green, that's the 802.11 RF transceiver, so that's the physical layer for the Wi-Fi. It's named AL2238. So this name is really important, keep it in your mind, and we'll use it later. And finally, the red component, and that's a SoC, a system on chip from Toshiba. It's named TC90-535XBG. So if you search for this part online, you will not find a lot of results. You will find only 2 documents. So this one is in English or in Japanese, depending on your preferred language. Here you will learn that TC90 implements 802.11n and also contains a 32-bit RISC core. But we don't have any information about the precise architecture. The second document, that's a slide deck in Japanese or in Chinese. Again, you can choose. And you will learn that TC90 was released in 2013 and is part of a family of components used for Bluetooth and wireless communication. So we know that this red component, TC90, that's the CPU, but we don't know the architecture yet. So what we can do next, we can try to use the FlashAir commands in order to get a bigger memory dump. And hopefully we'll be able to discover this CPU architecture. So in order to dump memory, we can use dump and fdump. So from telnet or commands, you can choose. And both will provide a similar result, which is a text output. Here I'm dumping memory at address 0. And the bad news here, that of course you can dump manually, but these 2 functions can only return at most 384 bytes. So dumping 2 megabytes with these commands will be slow. So for this project, I developed a tool called FlashRay that you can get on GitHub. That's a collection of tools that is reversing and interacting with the FlashAir. So for example, you can use them to telnet to the cards. Also, you can use them to dump memory. You can get it online, or if you're lazy like me, you can get the Docker image. And the Docker image is really useful because it contains all the tools that I will use today. And again, you will be able to do everything that I'm presenting. So let's try to use this FlashRay command in order to get a bigger binary. But next, I need to drink again. So dumping with FlashRay is really simple. At first, I plan to do a demo of these commands, but it takes around 20 minutes to dump the SPI flash, so I won't do that. So you just need to use dump from FlashRay and then give it a text file. 20 minutes later, we'll have a dump of the SPI flash, and then you can use a convert flag from dump in order to convert this text file to binary. And in the end, we'll have a file named dump w03.bin, which is 2 megabytes large. So we can go back to our game plan and check the first item, which was the memory dump. The dump being bigger than the update, next thing we can do is try to identify the CPU architecture, and to do so, we'll use strings again. So, these 2 strings are really interesting because they are likely used in order to print registers values. So in the first line, it's likely that the register name will be R00, R01, R02. The second line is likely containing specific registers named PSW, LP, and PC. So if you go online, look for these names, you will first get this page. And that's really important here because you will learn that this architecture is named MEP. This page is really cool because it's part of the SIGGEN documentation. If you don't know it, SIGGEN is a tool used to convert CPU architectures written in Guile, that's a programming language, funny one, with parentheses, to C. And the good news is SIGGEN is used in binutils. So it means that we are able to disassemble MEP. So again, it's demo time. Okay, so here I'm calling objdump on my binary. That's cool. And that's really nice because at first we have 2 jumps. So it's likely that we managed to guess the architecture correctly. So if we go to the first jump address, we'll also have instructions that make sense, so it's not garbage. So the architecture is definitely MEP. So let's go back to the slides. So at that stage of this research, I was really surprised to discover that the card is using MEP because this CPU is not really, at least to me, seems to be unknown to the security community. So I decided to have a look at devices that also used MEP. So first I discovered that on the left, that's an MP3 player from Toshiba. It's not possible to buy it anymore. So okay, Toshiba is using Toshiba products. Then in the middle I discovered that MEP is also used currently in Toshiba products. Oops. Didn't switch off my phone, sorry. So in the middle, I discovered that Toshiba is using MEP for image recognition in cars. And finally, it was indeed a bigger surprise. MEP is also used in the PS Vita. So it's likely that if you have a Vita, you also have MEP. And according to my understanding, MEP in that case is used as a secure element of the system to store keys used to decrypt files on the PSP. So the next missing element was the manual. And again, you can get several manuals in Japanese, and this one was the only one available in English. You have the link on the right if you want to download it. This document contains a lot of information, and first we learn that MEP means Media Embedded Processor. You will also learn that there are 5 types of MEP, from MEPC1 to MEPC5. On this card it is MEPC4. MEP, that's a typical MIPS architecture with 200 instructions, so I'm not the only one that did not switch off my phone. We are 2. So that's a typical MIPS architecture with 200 instructions, and they can be 2 or 4 bytes long, for example, depending on the length of the jump address. According to the documentation and my understanding, there is no privilege mode. It's likely why we can dump memory from any process. Regarding the calling convention, it's like what you find in MIPS. So you pass the first arguments with the registers, and then you use a stack. So MEP is a typical MIPS, so that's it for the MEP presentation. However, it has 2 really interesting instructions, and I hope that you will like them. So the first one is repeat, and the other one is e-repeat. And their goal is to loop over a block of instructions. That's really strange. So to explain them, I will use a short strlen example on the right. So we have the e-repeat instruction here, that's a main yellow block. And the e-repeat instruction will first set the RPB register, which means repeat begin. So here RPB will be the address just after e-repeat, so that's the address ending in 8C. It will also set the RP register, repeat end. It will be the address of e-repeat plus 6, so it will be the address ending in 8E. And how does that work? So when PC reaches the instruction just after repeat repeat end, RPE, it will be set back, PC will be set back to RPB. So we have an endless loop. And the only way you can exit the loop, as the CPU can exit the loop, is to take the branch. In that example, the R11 register must be equal to 0, so that the end of the string will pass to strlen. Repeat is quite similar, but it uses another parameter which configures the RPC register, that's repeat count. Indeed, that's a counter of the number of loops the CPU will take over the block. Okay, so the manual provides also more information, like the memory map. And here we can see that at address 0, we have 2 megabytes of memory. Indeed, that's the SPI flash that we done before. The manual also says that the first bytes contain the boot program, as well as the reset and NMI handlers. As we saw before with objdump, dumping the first instruction at address 0 works fine and makes sense, so it's not garbage. But we have an issue if we try to disassemble at higher addresses, the calls seems broken, function calls seem broken. So it's likely that the SPI flash is mapped at address 0 and somewhere else. So we need a way to discover that. So first, let me show you an example. The main problem here is that the BSR instruction, which is used to call functions, is using signed offset related to PC. And so calls can go to higher addresses or lower addresses. So in this example, here the BSR address is going really close to 4 gig, and of course we don't have 4 gig of memory on this card. So to get this main address, we'll use a tool that is named basefind, and we'll need to drink again. It's really my break. So basefind is really cool. If you don't know it, you should use it. That's a tool that works fine on MIPS and ARM. And the goal of basefind is to test different base addresses and return the ones, like on the screen, that are the most likely correct. So to do so, it performs several steps that do not depend on the architecture. And here we'll just have a look at the results. So basefind says that the base address is likely at address C00000. So what we can do next is use that address with objdump and the adjust VMA argument. So on top we have the broken, let's call it broken BSR address, and then we have the fixed address, which is CF F8A6. And the good news here is that this address points to our binary and also contain valid MEP code. So let's go back to our checklist. We have 2 items, the memory dump and the architecture. And using this main base address, what we can do next is count the number of functions in the dump. There are 6,500 functions, and that's a lot. And I don't do reverse for a living, so I was really expecting a number way smaller than that. Hopefully it's not. It's a big number, too big to me. And we can disassemble this binary with objdump, but indeed I discovered that reversing with objdump is not the best way to go. The output is flat. It's not really easy to navigate in between functions. So for example, if you want to follow a jump, and I did that like for several weeks, you can follow the jump with your text editor, and if you want to go back, that's a bit difficult. So reversing with objdump and Vim, that's not the best way to go. Don't do it. So let's have a look at map tools and map tools we need. Here's my wish list. So first, I need a tool that will know instruction semantics. And for example, that will be useful to know where the jumps, the calls, and the branches are going. And the main goal is to split blocks. Then I was looking for a tool that will emulate instructions. So in my case, I don't know reverse that much, so emulation helps me to validate function behavior. For example, I can check that the strlen function that I identified is actually returning the good results. And finally, I needed a tool that would be able to display the call graph and help me navigating between them. So first, I decided to implement my own MEP disassembler myself. It was a really bad idea, again, because it was too complex. So I quickly decided to use a tool named MyASM. So MyASM was presented this morning in a briefing. So I will be short on the MyASM presentation. This is a Python-based reverse engineer framework that can assemble, disassemble, and emulate instructions. And to me, and that's personal opinion, I think that its most important feature is that it is defining new CPU architecture. You only need to define how to encode and decode an instruction, and MyASM will take care of the rest. Next, I would like to show the power of MyASM and explain how we can implement an instruction. So this example is really simple. We'll try to implement the move instruction in map. One of them, it's moving one register to another. This instruction is 16-bit long, starts with 4 zeros. Then we have registers encoded on 4 bits each, and then it ends with 4 zeros. In MyASM, we use the add-up function in order to add an instruction. The first parameter is the function name, so here it's mov, and then we have a list to encode and decode. So first we have 40, BS means bit string, 40, then we'll tell MyASM to decode the next bit with a variable named rec4. Rec4 is just a trick to tell MyASM how to display register names. For example, if we have the value 5, it will display R05 when we will disassemble. And finally we have the last zeros. Next thing we want to do is implement the mov semantic with MySM. Again, that's really simple. You just need to implement a mov function in Python, and this one takes 2 parameters and assign one register value to another. The current map support in MySM is quite complete. You can emulate, assemble, disassemble most of the instructions. It should be 99%. And this is really nice because we can use a tool like Sybil. That's a tool that was also presented this morning. And this tool is really cool because it can discover functions based on jitters. And one of them is, of course, MySM. Sybil emulates functions and checks for their side effects. So, for example, to detect strlen, it will pass a string as the first parameter of a function and verify that the return value is equal to the length of the string. So calling Sybil is really simple. So in this example, I just gave it the top 100 addresses and managed to discover a bunch of functions, 9 of them. So it's really cool, 9 functions, because we did nothing more than calling Sybil on the binary. And all of these functions are related to strings, so it's likely that we can use them to explore on the binary a little bit further. For example, because we have strlen, it's really possible that the next call will be printf, for example. So finally, we need a tool to navigate the call graph. And for this project, I decided to use an open source tool named Radar. So it means raw data recovery. It seems that some people also say Radar-re, but I think Radar is okay. That's a console-based reverse engineering framework, and the most famous command is called R2. And this R2 command is able to display call graph. So here that's just a silly output of Radar. So for this project, I decided to develop a Radar 2 plugin called R2M2. R2M2 is mainly calling Python from C and is designed to use MySM2 features from Radar. So thanks to R2M2, we can disassemble MEP in Radar and also emulate it because R2M2 converts MySM2 expression into a Radar 2 Ether. R2M2 provides 2 plugins, and I would like to take a moment to describe the most important one, which is R2M2 AE. Here, A means analysis, and this part of the plugin will tell Radar where the branches, the jumps, and the calls are going. So here it is responsible to display these arrows, and is nicely saying to us that the jumps are going to higher addresses. Because we know where the jumps go and the calls go, Radar can build this cool call graph in a console. And here we are looking at the call graph at address 0x100, which is the first jump in the binary. So we can start reversing. And yes, I like to reverse with Radar. E stands for emulation, and I will explain that with a demo again. So first. Nope. Shell, okay. So Radar, and I need a binary. Okay. So first, what we need to do, we need to ask Radar to display emulation information. So if we disassemble swing instruction at address 0, we can see that after executing jump, PC will be set to 0x100. So then we can use AEI, that's analysis, emulation, initialize, in order to initialize the emulation engine of Radar. And then we can use AES to step into the first instruction. And here you can see, it's a bit far, so we'll use this one. We can see that we move from address 0 to address 100. So Radar took the jump thanks to MySM. So if we disassemble here, we move to a higher address. Let's go back to the slides. So it's a bit silly and simple, but it shows that Radar is able to emulate thanks to MySM. And during this project, I use this kind of trick in order to automatically discover some function address stored in registers. So we have tools, and we can start reversing. And because there are a lot of strings in the binary, we can try to use them to ease reversing. And today, I would like to use the strings for 2 goals. First, I would like to auto-name functions, and then I will use the strings in order to understand what the functions do. So first, let's discuss auto-naming. If you look at this binary long enough, a typical pattern used to display our messages will emerge. It uses 4 instructions, so that's here on the top of the screen. So first, it will load an error format string into R1. This string is using a string, %s, and an integer, %d. It's also really interesting because it contains keywords. So here the keyword is telnet. We also have WPS, WPA, and FAT. Finally, second instruction will load a string that is a function name. Here it's initialized into R2. Then it will load something which is likely a line number into R3 and call printf. And the good news here that what we can try to do, we can try to automate these steps and try to name a function in the binary. So the steps are the following. We can assemble all of these format strings, look for them in the binary, disassemble and check that we have these 4 instructions, and then look for the closest function prolog. And then we can auto-name the function. So if we apply all of these steps to the binary, Flashway will be able to detect 150 functions. And again, the good part that we did nothing more than launching a tool. And we also know why the functions are used. So some are used for telnet, some are used for WPS, others for WPA. So again, I will do a demo. So let's have a look at the telnet related function with a demo. So I have a really slow laptop. That's a Chromebook, cheap one. So first I will start the command and then explain what it does. So I need to find my shell. We are looking at naming. Okay. So this Flashway function called naming takes 2 parameters. First, that the base address. Then we have the name of the binary. And here I'm only looking for telnet. Inside, this naming function is using an R2 pipe Python module in order to talk from Python to RedR2. And the output of naming will be a R2 command that you can copy and paste into R2 in order to disassemble our binary. So it takes around 20 to 30 seconds. So here I'm only displaying function related to telnet. And for this demo, I will only show one function, which is a send login message. So I need to tap that. Okay. Then I will be able to copy and paste that. AF means analyze function. AFL will list the function that are to analyze, so this one. In order to make my life easier, I will load function from this file, function R2. Then I will move to send login message and show you the call graph. Just regular stuff. The really cool information here that the first call, BSR, is calling a function named tailClearSendBuffer, and this one was also auto-named thanks to Flashway. So it's again really easy. We can explore the binary thanks to strings. So let's go back to the slides. So the other goal of reversing with strings was to get a better understanding of function. So here the goal is to use strings as reverse engineering hints. So that could be seen as a really cheap version of auto-naming, and the goal is to use the hints command from Flashway in order to display functions that are using specific strings only. So here, in this example, I will ask hints to display the functions that are using a string containing update. And here on the left side, that the function address is. In yellow, C96870, that's the main update function. So in practice, it's a bit more difficult than that because you will need to try to reverse this function with Radar and understand that it's indeed the function doing the update. But in that case, that's the function that we are looking at. So we have a better understanding of the binary thanks to strings. So what we can do next is try to execute some code. And I would like to set 2 reverse engineering targets. The first one that's the update function, and the other one that's the configuration parser. So over the past 3 years, of course, I did a little bit more than that. I reversed many more functions, but these 2 are really important to get code execution. So this function, the update function, is way too long to be described today, so I will just focus on the important part. First, the update header is 32 bytes long. Start with a plain text flash R. Then it uses a keyword. We have 5 keywords that define 5 different types of updates. We have main2, that's the one we saw before, boot, RF, Mac, and user PRG. The checksum is really simple. It's 1 byte, and that's the sum of all bytes after the header. The Flashway update command that's implemented thanks to Scapy will display the update header and also is able to build fake updates. These 5 types of updates are really important because in the update function they are used in an array that is used to describe SPI memory map. And these names are indeed sections in the SPI flash that can be used to update the SPI flash independently. And boot and main2, so the two one on top in black, they contain MAP codes. And here you can see that main2, that's 1.8 megabytes, and the SPI flash is 2 megabytes. And this is a really important result because during the update, main2 is first erased with ones, and then the update is being written. So it means that the file that we got, fwupdate.fbn, contains most of the code we need to reverse, and also that indeed, if you want to reverse the flash share, you don't need to dump anything. You can just reverse this file. Then I don't know really on the content of this, the 3 other section. MAC at least contain the MAC address of the card, and other binary information that don't know what they are used for. RF contains a 2230 string as well as binary data. And if you remind 2238 that the name of the 802.11 RF transceiver. So it is likely that the binary part of RF is used to configure the 802.11 transceiver. And finally, user PRG is full of ones. So let's try to reverse the configuration parser. And this stuff is a really important target because it's used to configure values, like the PSK or the access point name. It's used to start daemon, and it's used to execute commands. So let's have a look next to the way telnet is started. So when processing the telnet parameter, the parseConfig function will call a function that I name telstart. This function is really small. It's here on the screen. At first, it will print telnet start, so that's the string we saw in ev.cgi. And then it will call a function at address 81.22.58 with 2 arguments, 34 and 0. And these 3 information are important. So we don't know this function yet, and let's say that we are lazy and we don't want to reverse it and move on with command execution. And indeed, we'll go back to this function later, 81.22.58, it's really important. There's a chain of functions used to execute commands, and in the end, command execution is done with a command function that I name execute command. This function is calling 2 other functions called isValid and isAuthorize. That's the name that I found. These 2 functions are using an array located at C9FF18. And if you look closely at this array, you will see that it contains 47 elements of a type that I name command T. Here you have an example of the structure, and these elements are really important because they contain the name of the command, function pointers, that's code we can reverse, as well as other information like the help message. 47 elements, that's a good number because that is 15 more commands than the 32 commands returned by the help message. So that in yellow you have like most of them, and one is really important, that's user PG. Why? Because its help message is start user program, and also its name is really close to user PRG, which is one of the SPI section names. Okay. So let's try to reverse this function and execute some code. Well, it's not really helpful at all. So the full content of the user PG function, that's 3 instructions. Again, it's calling 81.22.58, but this time with 2 parameters, 33 and 0. So of course, what we can do next is try to get a dump at this address, reverse it. I tried, too complex for me, so I didn't do that. And instead, what I will show today, we'll try to identify the operating system. So we are like, let's say 40 minutes into the talk, so I guess that you know what we'll do. We'll use strings again. If you look again at the binary, you will find this format string, which are really interesting. And this one contains a name, WPTSK, which looks really nice for an operating system. So if you search for this name online, you will discover this page saying that WPTSK is a function used to wake up a task in an operating system named tkernel. So what is tkernel? Tkernel is part of the Tron family, which means the real-time operating system nucleus. It is a Japanese real-time operating system started in 1984, so more than 30 years ago, by Dr. Ken Sakamura from Tokyo University. The specifications are maintained by something called Tron Forum, and this Tron Forum defines interfaces, API, and design guidelines for this operating system. I think it's time to drink again. And it seems that a typical version of Tron is called Mitron. Tkernel is one of the implementation name of Tron. You can find other one like Toppers, UDOS, DryOS. And the really cool information is, according to Tron Forum, these implementations are supported by more than 150 architectures. So that's a lot of CPUs. So again, I was really surprised to discover that the cards are using an operating system that seems unknown to the security community. So I decided to search again online for information related to devices that use Tron. So the shocking news first was I had a lot of Tron in my apartment. Most of the Japanese camera vendors, Sony, Nikon, Canon, and Casio, are using Mitron in their digital image processor. So it's like if you have one of these cameras, you have Mitron. Moreover, it's also used in the Joy-Con, so that from the Nintendo Switch, in order to handle Bluetooth communication. And the biggest surprise of all is that Mitron is also used in space, in something called the Asteroid Explorer Hayabusa. And I think that's amazing. We have an operating system in space and here on my desk. So going back to the card, we still need to find the name of the Tron implementation. So if we search for the nucleus string, we'll get these answers, NetNucleus. And indeed, NetNucleus, that's the name of an IP stack from Toshiba. That is named UDOS for Unified Development Environment Operating System. Here we are not really lucky because you have UDOS 4 implementing Mitron 3 specification and Mitron 4 specification and UDOS 3 implementing Mitron 3 specification. So what we can do is read the Mitron 4 specification and see that in between version 3 and 4, the task names have been renamed from run to running, wait to waiting, and suspend to suspending. So again, grep. And here we'll see that we have in the binary waiting, suspended, running, and here we have UDOS 4 on the device. So we can check one more item out of the list. In that case, that's the operating system. In order to get code execution, and the talk is almost finished, we need to solve the 812258 mystery. And to do so, we'll use autonaming. So thanks to autonaming, we know the address of the function that starts the telnet daemon. That is a function that binds to port 22. If you look for BSR instruction using this function address, you won't find any. So what we can do, we can search for this address in the dump. So that's the R2 command that I use here. There is a single match at address D0, E8, E4. And if you look closely at this data, at the data around this address, you will see a potential task array. And it makes sense because according to Mitron specification, tasks are included in the binary during compilation. And there is a fixed number of tasks. So we can try to have a look at this array. So that just some example on the right. Task number 21 at the DHCP server, 24 at the DNS server, 27 will call the function parseConfig that we reversed, 34, that's a number that we saw before, that's the address of Telnet, 33, user PG. So it's likely that this function, 812258, is a Mitron service call, that's the name of system calls, called STA task, that moves a task to the ready state. So we still don't know what the user PG command does, so we can reverse it, user PG task. So it's really short, less than 10 blocks. It does three things. First, it checks that the user PRG section is not empty. And then in the blue section, it will jump to this address. And then it will call the function at address 0. And that is indeed our execution vector. So because we can build a flag update, we can execute code on the card. So checklist, we can remove the last item. Before the demo, I must say that Toshiba is aware of these results in June, thanks to GPSearch that helped me to reach Toshiba. So if we put everything together, we can try to do a demo and execute code on the card. So going back, it will be a live demo. I need to try to connect to the card over Wi-Fi. That's the bad part usually. Okay. Nope, nope, nope. Okay. For some reason, writing to the config file will start the Wi-Fi. Okay. Yay! Okay. So what we can do first, I can show you the payload. which is in calc bin. The payload is really small. I wrote it myself in assembly. It took me days. No, I'm kidding. 3 instructions. The first one will load the printf address into R0 and then the address of run string in R1. Next, we can build the fake update by calling the update function of FlashArray, and then you will compute the checksum and add a user PRG header. Then we can copy the file to the card, connect to the file to the card with Telnet. I will show you the version of the card. So it's .01. So if you buy a card, you can do the same again. Then we can update. No, sorry, that's calc.update. We can update the card. We can dump memory. Only 16 bytes. So it's not once. And then hopefully we'll have a calc. Yay. So it works. So we got native code execution on the card. Oops. Okay. So it's a bit silly. However, this calc is a result of many, many hours of work, and I believe more things can be done with the FlashArray. So first, I would like to look for remote vulnerabilities, and I think it will be really cool to be able to understand how the card is doing with 802.11 and do our own frame injection with the card. Then I would like to release a SDK that will allow people and me to ease developing payload in C, because CCC, some old version, they support MEP. And finally, I believe it's really possible to develop custom firmware that change the FlashArray behavior. And for example, what we could do, it will be really cool, we can make the FlashArray encrypt or hide pictures returned to the disk. And that will be really cool, because according to recent news, that will likely help some photographers in their daily job. So I will conclude with 3 words. First one is unexpected. So when I started this project in 2015, I believed that the card will run Linux on ARM. It was a bit different. It was UDOS from Toshiba on MEP from Toshiba. Next keyword is original. This is the first time that native code execution is described on a FlashArray. And moreover, this project is likely a perfect example of a complex analysis of an embedded system. And finally, it's really important to me, reproducible. All of the tools are online today. You can try to reproduce everything yourself. And of course, if you need more details, please contact me and I will be happy to help. So here's a list of the tools that I use during the talk. They are all online. You can use them all. And that's it. If you have any question, I will be happy to give you answers.